Okay, hi guys. I'm going to give you a basic tutorial. It's basic, but there's a lot of parts on Final Cut Pro for the slideshow. Okay, first off, you probably haven't used the program yet, so on your computer it will not be shortcutted. I'm going to show you how to shortcut it. I have it shortcutted. You're going to go to the magnifying glass here at the top right corner. You click on it and you type in Final Cut Pro, and you'll see it there. When it comes up, you click on it, drag it down to your toolbar, and it'll make room for it like that, and then you just plop it in there. I already have it, so I'm not going to leave it there. I'm not going to put it there because I already have it, okay? And then once you do that, you can click on it. Every time you log in on that computer, it will be shortcutted for you. So I'm going to click on it to open it. And this is the program. So I'm going to go over some basics. There's some stuff obviously here that I've been working on, so you'll see a whole bunch of things here, but we will create a new project in a second. I just want to go over some of the workspaces first. So right off the bat, if you notice here on the left side, there's a whole bunch of list of what we call events, and the icon for the event is this square with a star in it. An event is just an importing session. So anytime you import stuff into the program, it creates an event, which is really like the Mac's way of saying folder. And those are all created here. The icon that you see here that's 4 squares, that's a library. So that's just a collection of events. All your stuff that you import will be in there. And once you get into the library, you can create different libraries. It will be organized into events, which are really folders. Inside your event, you will have whatever you import that you want to use in a particular project. So if you look at different events, you'll see here there's sound files. This is a big sound file. And then there's also video. That's all in this event. Also in a particular event, when you create a project, so remember, an event is bringing in things, assets we call them, like video, pictures, sound, music effects, all that stuff. You bring it into an event, and then you can use that stuff to create a project, but the project file is a different file. It is only the instructions for the program that you tell it when you want to cut to this picture, when you want to put on this effect, etc. All that information is in the project file. And when you create the project, we're going to put it in the same folder or event as all your assets you're going to use in your project. So everything's in one spot, just more organized. Okay, so we're going to get to that, but just in terms of spaces, this is your event library, or your event, sorry, this is your event viewer. This is where you see all your events. This is also where you view your stuff here actually visually, so you'll see the actual clips here. This here is your viewer in terms of previewing stuff. So this is not a project yet sometimes, but anything you want to look at, be it coming from your project or from here, is going to be shown here. We're going to get to that later though. Here is something called the inspector, and this is a space where when you select something, you have a whole bunch of options of things you can change, parameters. That's when I've selected something. So whatever I select, you'll see this clip is selected. If I select this one, then I can make changes. Let me just fix this in the inspector. Now, usually you can't change things unless you bring it to the timeline, which I'm getting to next. This is the timeline. This is where you're going to put your project together. Whatever you put down here is what you're going to see on the screen here, and that will be your project that you're going to export eventually as a video. Okay. Now, first thing we want to do is we want to create, bring in some stuff, okay? So what we're going to do is create a project and an event. Now remember, event is a folder. So we're going to go to File, New, Event. You'll see there also is a project option. I'm going to do event because when you go through event, you can create your event and project in one shot, whereas the other way, it's separately, okay? So I'll show you why that's better. So you say new event. We go to this page here, and you'll see there's a few things here that we can change, the first thing you should do for sure is create your event, make it something that's important for your whatever you're working on, your project, right? So let's say I'm going to call this video slideshow tutorial. Okay, it's going to go, I have two libraries. One is what I call school. I'm going to put it in that one. That's where you can select here. And this is already selected, but make sure you've selected it as well. Create new project. So it's going to make an event, and within that event, remember event's a folder, it's going to also create a new project in that folder. Okay, all this other stuff here you don't have to touch right now. It's pretty much set to what we want. Okay, and you say okay. Okay, now we remember we put it in the school library, the event we created, and we called it video slideshow tutorial. So if I come down here, you'll see it's here, and if I click on it, you'll see in there we haven't brought anything in, so there's nothing in there, except we also created a project, right? So there's your project. Project files will have this slate look. This is a video slate or a clapboard. That is the icon for project. Okay, event is just a star. So here you'll see that we created the event and we called it something relevant, but it doesn't do it for the project. So you want to go here to the, it says untitled project. It's kind of cut off here. You can adjust this if you want. There we go. And you click here, and when it's highlighted, you can change it. So I'm going to call it the same thing I called my event. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to close this a bit better, or a bit back to kind of where it was, because I want my viewer to be a bit large. Okay. Now, once we have that, we want to start bringing things in that we can edit. So you're in that event. There's two ways to import. There's an arrow right at the top here, a downward arrow, which you can click. Or there's a shortcut, which is Command-I. Remember, on a Mac, Command is mostly the key we used instead of Control on Windows. Okay, so a lot of the things like Control-Z, which is undo on a Windows computer, will be Command-Z on a Mac. So I'm going to do the shortcut, Command-I. It'll bring up this screen, and now you just have to tell it where you want to bring in your stuff from, where it is on your computer. Okay, so I'm going to go, I've already put pictures on here. When you guys do yours, there might be the SD card up here, so you can select the SD card and bring in your pictures. I'm going to my desktop, and I already have a folder created, which is this one, Final Cut Pro Basics Tutorial. Okay, there's a whole bunch of things here. All these are pictures. I'm going to bring them in. If I just go into the folder, you'll see nothing is selected. Everything will be brought in if I just press Import All, or you press Return. If you want to bring in just some of them, you can click on it, and as you hold down Command, you can add other ones that you want to bring only if you don't want to bring them all in. Okay. In this case, I want to bring them all in, so I'm just going to put Import Selected. Oops. No, I have to select them all now. Okay, so now you'll see all the pictures are here that I brought in the same events that we created, and now we're going to start working with them. Okay, there's different ways also to bring your clips down. In this case, it's photos down to the timeline here. One way is to just, the easiest way, like many times, is just to click it and you drag it, okay? You'll see when I click on it that some of it is only selected. I'm going to drag these highlights to the end, okay? And then I'm going to drag it down to the timeline. I'm going to undo that just to show you that's the drag method. You can also just press W, and you'll see that it brings it here to the timeline. Now, it's the first clip, and this is our cursor, we call it. So wherever I put this is what you're going to see on screen. There's no clip here, so that's why it's black video up here. There's nothing there. Wherever this is, when I press W to bring clips to the timeline, that's where it's going to bring them. So you see if I put it at the beginning and I press W, this same one is still selected. It'll put it before. Let's use a different one so we can notice the difference. So if I select this one, and I press W, you'll see it puts it where the cursor is, which is actually before the other photo. If I put this to the end, and I press W, it'll put it there at the end. Okay, so there's different ways of doing it. Click W, or you can just drag and drop. whatever way you prefer. Okay, so I brought these down. We've talked about a cursor. One thing you'll notice is that when you bring photos to the timeline, I selected the whole thing. As you can see, if I click on some of them, you'll see only part of it is selected. And if I bring it down, you'll notice that it's actually shorter than that clip because less of it is selected. That is not that important because this is a picture. Okay, so we're not gonna, it's just the same picture. It's one frame that stays on the screen for as long as we want it to. If I wanted to make this longer, I can just go to the end of it, click. When I see that icon show up, which is like a bracket with 2 arrows, and then you can just drag it on forever. I can make it as long as I want, okay? So in this assignment, don't be too worried if you bring it down to the different size, okay, or they're different time on screen. We can adjust that very easily, okay? I'm just gonna delete that so it's not in our way. So now I'm gonna bring down a whole bunch of things. You can actually select everything here as well, which I'm gonna do. I'm going to deselect the one I already brought down because I don't want to bring that again. And then I'm going to press W, and there you go. You see all the clips came down. Okay, the size of all these right now, if I click on it and I right-click and I say change duration, you'll see in this part over here in this area, this is what we call the time code underneath the viewer. And here it'll tell you how long that clip is. When I say change duration, it means I want to change how long it is on screen. So one way you can do is by dragging it to as small or as long you want it, or you can say right click, change duration, and that will come up. The shortcut for that is Control D. If I do Control D, this will now be kind of a purplish color. That means it's ready to edit. So I can put in, and you'll notice the time code. What this means is 10 seconds and 0 frames. There's 30 frames per second. And this is the seconds. And then when we go further, it's not decimal system, it's basically frames per second. So this can go up to 29. As soon as we hit 29 and you go higher than that, it's technically the next second. So I'm going to change this, let's say, just to show you, to 6 seconds. So it'll be 6, 0, 0, 6 seconds and 0 frames. I press return and you can see that it shortened that clip. So there's different ways of doing it. Some people like hands-on. You can just grab the end, like I said, put your cursor there. When that icon shows up, you click, hold it, and drag it to the length you want. Now, another thing you might want to do, this is not as important for this project, but you might want to zoom in on the timeline, not what you see up here, but on the timeline itself when you want to be more precise in your editing. The shortcut for that is Command plus or minus. So if I Command plus, make sure you're clicked on the timeline, you'll see that I get closer to the timeline so I can see things more clearly. If I don't need that precision, I can go Command minus and you can see everything gets a lot smaller. And eventually that's the smallest you can get. Okay, another thing that's important is something called snapping. So I'm going to delete this last photo just for a second. Over here on the right side, there's something called snapping, which is this icon here. And now it's selected. Whatever is selected is usually purple. So that means that whenever I bring something down to the timeline, it's going to basically stick to either the cursor or the edge of the previous photo. It finds those edges and it clicks and it attaches to them so that you don't have gaps. And that's very helpful. So we deleted this one here. So I'm going to take it now, and you're going to see if I try and put it over here, it's going to suck it right back and stick it to the end of that other photo. It's a good feature for this because that means you don't have any gaps in between in terms of frames. Okay? That's called snapping. If I don't put it on, you might not get the snapping feature. Okay? Next, some of our tools. If you go to this pull-down menu here, which is right above the timeline on the left side, underneath the event viewer, you click on that and there's a whole bunch of tools here. The most important one for this project is select, which means you can grab things and move them around. The other one is blade, which is basically, looks like a razor blade. And that just means you're going to be able to cut. So now I'm going to zoom in back in the timeline so you can see this more clearly. So let's say I wanted to cut this clip. This is a bit of a harder way. This is going to be better in video, but if you want to just cut, you put the cursor wherever and you click. I'm going to go back to select now. And you can see that this is now two separate pictures or two separate files on the timeline. Up here, if I actually play this, you don't notice any difference because it's the same picture. Even though you cut it, you're not going to notice a change up on your viewer because it's exactly the same. Okay, I'm going to undo that. Another effect you can add to photos, more so than video, but for this assignment it's more suited, is something called the Ken Burns effect. So if I select one of my photos here on the timeline, the Ken Burns effect is basically a slow zoom in or out of your picture just to give it a little bit more energy, a little bit more emotion. So I'm going to click on one of my photos, and then I'm going to go here, this pull down menu again, and I'm going to click it and go to crop. Once you do that, you'll see different options come up, and one of them is Ken Burns. So if you click on Ken Burns, you'll see the framing for the beginning and ending of your little zoom comes up, and it's called start and end. So in this case, it's going to start in, you'll see the start is smaller, which means it's going to start closer, and it's going to zoom out slowly to the end position, which is the red. Okay? I'll just leave it like that for now, and I'll show you. Say done, and if we play it, you'll see it's a slow zoom out. Now, if you didn't like that, you can actually change. If you wanted to zoom in instead of zooming out, you would just enlarge your start position, and you would move this now wherever you want to end up. That's my start, that's my end. I say done, and if you look now on screen, you'll see we are zooming in slowly. You can also adjust where you end up. You can zoom into a specific spot. If there's different things on screen, you can put your end point and your start point anywhere you want. The only thing that you have to think about is if you're making them really a different size, to get to that zoom in the short amount of time that this picture is on screen, it's going to have to go faster. So that might not be the look you want, right? But you can play around with that, whatever suits your project. Okay, now, let me just redo that. Okay, now, the next thing we're going to look at is effects. So if I select this clip, you go to the right over here, there's this icon that has two overlapping rectangles. You click on that, and all the effects come up. And you'll see there's video and audio. It shows them all. And then you can go just to video, and if you click underneath each of them, you see you can go to all of them, or if you want to get more specific, there's basics, there are filters, there's blur effects, color, etc. And whatever you decide, underneath you'll see there's audio as well. So let's say I wanted to put this hard light, or let's actually get one that's more, okay, this one. If you go over the actual effect icon where it says negative, wherever your cursor is on the timeline, and you see over here it's on this clip, that's what I'm seeing on screen, it'll give you a preview of what it's going to look like. So that's negative. If I go here, that's threshold, that's hard light, etc. Okay? If you want to use it, all you have to do is you drag it onto your clip. And now that effect is on that clip. And you can see on screen, if I play it, you'll see that it looks different than it did before. Okay? Once you put an effect on, up here in your inspector, there'll be some adjustments you can make with that effect. So you'll see the amount is 100% of that effect. If I drag it back, you can see that the effect lessens. And if it's 0, of course, it's not even there. And I can adjust it to any level. I'm going to leave that at 100, and I'm also going to show you here, this box has been ticked or checked. If I uncheck it, it removes the effect. So it's a good way of checking if you like it or not. You can put it on, take it off, okay? And that way you can look at it with effect and without. Now let's say I put it on, but I didn't like it. I want to get rid of it. You select it here in your inspector and just press delete. And then your effect has been deleted. Okay, transitions. So in between, you'll notice I'm going to put my cursor here. I'm going to press play. And by the way, the shortcut for play is spacebar. I'm going to play, and you'll see when it cursor goes to the next photo, it just goes straight to that photo. There's no real transition other than just moving to the next photo. If you wanted to add transitions, then you go to this icon here, which is the two, I guess, two triangles that are tip to tip. And then you click on that, and then a whole bunch of different effects come up. Transitions. Also categorized into different types. So I'm just going to put a very basic one here, which is they call dissolves or fades. Here they call it dissolve, and it's going to be called a cross dissolve. And it's going to be fading out one picture and fading to the next. Okay, so I'm going to drag it. And remember, this is a transition, so you have to put it between where one photo changes to the next. I'm going to zoom in a bit so you can actually see the transition better. There it is. And if we play it, you'll see that this will fade out and the other one will fade in. So that's pretty quick. You can extend it. If I just go right to it, everything here is basically drag, if you want to drag and extend. So I'm going to click the end of the transition. If I want it to fade out longer, I'm just going to drag it like that. And you can see now the fade is longer, which means it's a slower transition on screen. Okay. I'm going to leave that in for now. If you wanted to do green screen, I have some photos here that I brought into our event originally. If you look up here, I have a fish that's green screen in the back, and you have the ocean underwater. So I'm going to drag the ocean clip to the timeline, put it right there, and that's my background. So you're going to put that on first, or bring it to the timeline first. And the way it works is you just take your green screen picture, and now you're going to drag it. I'm just going to extend it fully so they're the same length on screen, which is 10 seconds. And you put it right on top of the background. Now, when I put it there, you'll see where snapping is effective. As soon as I come to the edge of that clip, you'll see the line comes up, bang, that yellow line means you're aligned, and you will not have any gap between the previous photo and this one. Okay, so that's where the snapping feature really is handy. Okay, now that we've done that, you'll see that there's no background to see because right now we haven't applied the effect, but whatever is on top of another clip going up this way, that's what you see on screen. So we can't see the background at the moment. We're going to go back to our effects panel, and you're going to click on this, and you're going to go under your video effects, go to keying, and the effect we want is keyer. We're going to drag it on here, and now you'll see that the background has been applied. Okay. Now, if you don't like where the fish is in the photo, you can actually move it. If I go to this icon here, there's three options here. There's transform, crop, and distort. We're going to do transform. And now you'll see this little circle in the middle here. You can grab it and you can move the fish wherever you want. Okay? Once you have it in the position you want, I'm basically going to put it back where it was, and I say done here, and we're done. So that's green screening. Okay, next we're going to look at, let's say the fish here actually matches fairly well with the background because it's pretty well lit. It looks like there's sunlight above the water, and it's pretty bright on the fish. Let's say you didn't like that though, and you wanted to make it darker. You click the clip that you want to adjust, and then you go to this pull down menu here, which looks like kind of like a clock. You click on it. Oh, sorry, not the clock, this one, which is the magic wand. Click on it and you say show color board. Now you can adjust a whole bunch of colors. For this, I would suggest we're not going to work with color that much. You'll see color selected. We're going to go all the way over here to exposure, and that's going to allow us to just change the contrast and the brightness. So if that was, let's say I wanted it to be darker, this is blacks, grays, and whites, I would pump up the blacks, or sorry, pull them down, and that would increase the blacks, okay? If I wanted to make it brighter, I pull up the whites, etc., whatever you like, grays, etc., okay? And that can change your exposure. If I don't want what I did, you can drag them back to the line, but the easier way is just to press this reverse arrow, and that resets everything back to normal, okay? If you don't want the color board up here anymore, you want the inspector back, you just click on this arrow and it removes the color board and you're back to the inspector. When we green screen, it's usually, just getting back to green screen for a second, it's usually pretty clear. You can see there's no problems here in the back. The background attached perfectly. You can adjust it here in the effects in the inspector. Okay, so keyer was applied, so there's some adjustments you can make. And you can see that if I drag this, it changes how much, but the green is so good here that we're not going to get much adjustment. It actually works just perfectly. And for our purposes, you probably won't have to do that. Okay, next. Sometimes you might want to go to the beginning of your project. So on your keyboard, I have a laptop and I'm a MacBook Pro, so there's a different way, but on your computers, on your keyboard, if you press home, and you're on the timeline, clicked on the timeline, you press home, it'll bring you to the beginning of your project. If you press end, it'll bring you to the end. Okay, so that's sometimes a good feature. When you're editing and you're working on this section, you keep adding, okay, I want to start it now. I want to see from the beginning, you can just press home, spacebar, and then your video will begin. Okay, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to shorten these clips so we can see this whole thing now. There's different ways to shorten. I'm just going to do it really quickly here. I'm going to get rid of this transition. Now, if you wanted to put, okay, we'll just do it the easier way. We're going to go to transitions. We're going to put cross dissolves on all of these. Oh, didn't get it. And once we do that, we're going to play it and see how it is, and then we're going to export it, and then we're done. Okay. So now if I play, you'll see that we switch pictures with dissolves. Another thing you might want to do is put in music. There's two icons here. One is the music icon, so that's for music and sound. And here we have titles and backgrounds. First I'm going to do the music. I'm going to click on that. And it's connected to iTunes. And you'll see that there's a lot of pre-done sound effects in here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take sound effects. You see this is to iTunes. If you bring in something, import it into the Mac, it'll be in iTunes. I'm going to go to sound effects. No, it's not here. Okay. I have some songs already here, so I'm just going to bring them in from there. When you guys bring in songs, you can actually drag, if you have an MP3 file on your desktop, you can drag it right into the event. Or you can put it in iTunes and then bring it in from there. So I'm going to select to have the Beach Boys here. I'm going to drag this down to the timeline. You'll see, obviously, video and audio are not the same, so it's going to put it on a different track. Now this is on the bottom here. Obviously, it's not video, so you will hear the sound. Sound gets layered. So if you stack like 100 songs here, you're going to hear them all. It's not like video where if you put it on top, it won't show. So if we go to beginning now and we start playing. So there we have our song now. And you can adjust volume if you go right on the file here. And in the middle there's a line, and if you want it louder, you're going to, when you see those two triangles, you're going to click, and dragging up is increases the volume and dragging down decreases it. You can also do that up here in your inspector. You'll see this is selected. There's a volume control right here. Okay. You can drag the slider, or if you click right on it, this is measured in something we call decibels or dBs. If I do 0, that's back to default. And there's also a return to default with your arrow here. Okay. Same now with music, same thing. If you want to shorten it, the end is pretty far away there, so I'm going to make this zoom out so we can see it. I'm just going to drag it and click, and then I can bring it right back, and then I've actually shortened it. Now, you might want to, a lot of times for this project, your slideshow is going to be probably around 2 minutes or so, and songs are usually longer than that. So if you use a whole song, you might have to fade it out. So if I'm gonna just zoom in here on the end of this song. Remember, when you go over this line here, you'll see these two triangles show up. That means you can adjust volume. If you go to the end of a clip, there's a little ball there where if you put your cursor on top of it, these triangles now go horizontal. That is how you can apply a fade. So if I click it now and drag that little ball, you'll see that it kind of has a little downward line there that shows the fade. Okay, so if I do this, that's a longer fade. If this is a short fade, I'm going to do a longer one and let go, and now we have a fade. Okay, so if we listen, I'm going to make it shorter so we can hear it. And you'll see that it fades it out. Now that's pretty abrupt. If you want a longer fade, you would just, that little ball is still there, you grab it and you just extend it, and the fade will take longer, it'll be more smooth. And that's it. Another thing you might want to do is add titles to your video. Up here is the titles bar, and if we go a bit closer, you'll see there it is. And if you click on it, in this area here, a whole bunch of different titles will come up. There's generators, which are backgrounds. We're going to focus on titles. So if you look here, there's basic title. There's a whole bunch of different ones. There's basic 3D, etc. I'm just going to stick, and if I open this up, you'll see there's different categories as well. I'm going to stick with the basic 3D for now, but you can use whatever you like. So if here's my timeline. If I drag the title to the timeline, you'll see I'm going to drag it over an existing picture. And if that is the case, it will show up. It's a bit hard to see, but if you look in this area here, you'll see there's the title. If I double click on it, I can edit it. I can change, in the inspector, I can change font size, font type. So if you look here, there's different fonts. Let's say I want something a bit more bold. Do that. I can change the size. You can change the color and face. So let's say in my picture here, I want black. I'll just do this. And there you have it. You can move it around. And like I said, you can change the size. Anything is possible. So if I like it, I'm going to go back down, and I can also change the duration that it is on screen, just like we changed for video clips, or sorry, for pictures. I can change for this. So if I could right click and I say change duration, time code will now be purple. It's now 10 seconds. That's the default when I bring it to the timeline. I can change it to, if it's too long, let's say, I can change it, let's say, to 6 seconds and 0 frames. And if you'd like, it did get shorter. Or you can just drag it. Also, you can change it that way, and you can put it wherever you want, basically. So if you put it over a picture, it will show up on top of the picture. It will overlay. I can also put it at the end. So if I grab it and I bring it this way and I put it here, it will just show up on screen. Oh, now it's black, so it won't show up. So I'll go here and just change the face really quickly to white. And there it is again. Okay, so now it'll just show up over black video. And that's it for your titles. Last thing. So once you're happy with what you've created here, you can preview it. Like we said, you go to the beginning, you press play, you will see and hear what you've done. If you're happy with what you've done, now we have to export it as a video file. We go to the top corner here, and there's this square with an arrow coming out of it. That's share, which means for us export. You click on it, and you select master file. Now, one thing you have to make sure though, if you have a clip selected like that and I say share, it's going to export just that clip. So I want you to click somewhere on the timeline where there's nothing, no photos, no music, nothing. Just click there and then go to master file through share. You click on master file and these will come up. Now this is going to give you the size of the exported project. If you see something here that says like 5 megabytes or 2, that means you've probably selected just one file. Make sure that you've selected somewhere in the timeline. The only other thing I want you to check now is in settings, in this window there's another option here, settings, click on it. There's something called a video codec, which is basically the package that they're going to put the video file in. I want you to select H.264. You might be defaulted to something called Apple ProRes. Now, if you remember, my size of my project was 142 megabytes. If we go to the default, which was this ProRes, you'll see it's almost 1 gigabyte. Too big for what we need. That's for projecting onto a big screen, a more grander project. We don't need that. Okay, we want to choose the codec that's going to have really good quality actually, but it's going to compress the file to a size that's much more manageable for us. So make sure that is there in settings, and format video and audio, that should be defaulted. If it's not, and it's only audio, obviously only export audio, etc. And you're going to say next. Here it's going to call it basically what you called your project. Okay, so it should be ready to go, unless you want to call it something else. For you guys in the slideshow, you're going to put video slideshow, and in your brackets beside it, the first names of the people in the group. Here you're going to select where you want it. The desktop is usually a good spot, and then you say save. Now if you look over here, there's kind of like a clock feature. When you click save, it's not done immediately. So one of the things that people do, and it could cause a problem, is they will go to the file. If I just minimize this, and you'll see it's creating my file. You see there's no screenshot. That means it's not done yet. It's still exporting it. If you take that file and you submit it into Classroom before it's finished processing, it will come up corrupted on my side. So make sure that you wait till this shaded part, you can see it's moving along now, has gone all the way across and up here and done right back to the beginning. That means it's finished. Once it's done that, the screenshot, which is here, will appear on the video file. And QuickTime may come up and say your project up here will say it's finished exporting or sharing, and it may bring up QuickTime so you can see it as a finished product. And we're just going to wait a couple of seconds here, and it's almost done. I'm going to move this a little bit so you can see how this icon will now change when it's finished. And just about there. Done. So you see it says share successful. That's how you know it's done. That's one way. QuickTime came up, so you can preview it. So if I press this, this is the finished product now. Okay, so you can preview it. It's a good idea to take a look at it, make sure everything's okay. And you'll see now that our video file has a screenshot, which you know means it's also done. So now you can take that and drag it into Classroom and submit it. Okay, that's a lot of stuff. If you look in the bottom, I will put, if I post it on YouTube, I will put kind of like a chapter selection, which will guide you to the skills that you need specifically if you want to refer back to them. That's it. And of course, I will be in class with my TAs, and you can ask questions if you have them.